This is the first lecture on the religion of Hinduism. Hinduism is the religion of 1 billion people, 95% of which live in a single country, that of India. It is one of the world's oldest religions, but unlike the other major religious traditions we will study this semester, Hinduism has no distinct founder. You cannot trace an event like the Hajj. You cannot look at a person like Jesus or Moses. Hinduism does not afford us any look historically as to where it came from. It can be a very confusing religion for us in the West because it does not adhere to strict categorical philosophical guidelines. One Hindu can believe one thing about God and the neighbor believes something completely different, and yet they have no trouble calling each other good Hindus. We'll find out a little more why that is as we study this unit. But the concept that most perplexes Westerners about Hinduism is the concept of God. There are, by some accounts, 330 million deities within the Hindu religion. It's almost one deity per 3 Hindus. And so many Westerners have come to see Hinduism as polytheistic, but that is an erroneous notion. Hindus do not see themselves as polytheistic. But when they talk about God, as we will hear in a moment, again, it's going to sound as if they're confused and they're contradictory and it's not logical, it's not coherent. But for a Hindu, for most people who follow the Hindu way, they don't see a problem. They see it all as part of a rich diversity of a way to understand God. The first thing we need to talk about as we talk about God, though, is to review these 2 terms, transcendence and immanence. That which is transcendent is above and beyond. It is outside of this intelligible world. So those people who see God as transcendent, they would say that we really can't understand God. We really cannot perceive God. He is utterly beyond our ability to describe, to imagine. On the other hand, those people who see God as immanent see God as embedded within the world. He's close to us. So that word actually embedded is good. Almost imagine if you're going to embed something in a video or embed it within a PowerPoint presentation. It's right there in the midst of everything else. And even within the other major religious traditions, these terms for God can be a source of debate and discussion. How much is God transcendent, beyond our ability to understand? And how much is God close to us, the God in all things? Christians have varying views on this, spectrum of views, as do many other religions. What is interesting about Hinduism is they would say God is both completely transcendent and completely immanent. And as an illustration, there's one story in the Mundaka Upanishad, that's one of the sacred texts of Hinduism that we'll talk about eventually. There's a story about water and salt. And if you'll believe that I'm doing it here, there are stories about how a dad, trying to explain to his son the nature of God, said, "Son, put some salt in the water." So I'm doing that right here. I'm sure you can imagine. If you need to do it yourself, feel free. And when the son had put the salt in the water, he invited his son to taste the water. So the son did. And the dad said, "What does it taste like?" He said, "Salt." He said, "I want you now to pour out some of the water. Pour out, let's say, 1/4 of it." So the son did, and he said, "Taste it again." It's still salty. And this happens successive times. The dad saying, "Pour out a little more," or "Take water from the bottom of the cup, take it from the middle of the cup." And when that experiment or illustration was done, the dad then said, "No, I want you to take that cup of water and throw it on the ground." And the son did it. I won't do it here. And they said, "Let's come back tomorrow." So when the son came back and the dad came back the next day, the dad said, "Well, what do you see?" And the son said, "Well, I see salt on the ground." And the dad said, that is the nature of Brahman, the term that Hindus will use for God. And This illustrates how God is both transcendent and immanent. The water represents the universe, all that is. The salt is Brahman. So you cannot fix Brahman in any one part of the created order. It's everywhere. If I drink from the top of the water, the bottom of the water, I pour some of it out, it's sort of in the midst of it all. It's embedded within the entirety of creation. But you cannot equate Brahman, the salt, with the water. So when the water was thrown out, or in the cup, the water was thrown out and it dried up, salt still remained. The water was gone. So even if there is no creation, there is still a source of that creation. So the way many Hindus talk about Brahman is the one beyond language, beyond thought, beyond images. Brahman is the source of everything, but is beyond everything. A term they'll often use to describe Brahman is neti nekti. And that is meant to imply that God is neither this nor that. Translate that into English. God is not this and not that. It really harkens back to something Aquinas actually said about God. Now, we noted very early in the Christology course that Aquinas said, well, God must be all-powerful, God must be all-knowing, because for God to be God, he must be all-powerful. Otherwise, he's not a God. But even when Aquinas said that, he added that whatever we say about God, we know a lot less about God than we can affirm about God. It's called the via negativa. More things we don't know about God than we do know about God. That's a little like what Hindus believe. Although they would even say, we cannot even affirm really that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, because the minute you affirm that, you are limiting God. You are denying God's, Brahman's, transcendence. So if Brahman is this unifying principle that pervades all of creation, that holds it all together, how is it that many people believe that Hindus are polytheistic, that their gods number in the dozens, hundreds, some even say millions? Well, it's important to understand that for Hindus, God, Brahman, is manifested in many ways, and the gods are the various ways in which Brahman becomes manifested. But the three most common, most popular ways that Brahman is manifested is through Brahma, which is the creator, Vishnu, who is the restorer, and Shiva, which functions as the destroyer aspect of God. Some Christians mistakenly believe that this represents a sort of Hindu trinity, but it's not three persons in one God, three persons distinct and yet unified, one. No, there are manifestations of Brahman. And we need to be a little careful. You might think, oh, destroyer, that's bad. That's a mean God, a negative God. No, within Hindu spirituality, the function of destruction can and often is very positive, a very good thing. You cannot have something new until the old is destroyed. So you'll often hear various Hindus attached to Vishnu or Shiva. Not so much Brahma, although Brahma certainly acknowledges the creator. Now, what's important as a last point to consider is that Hinduism represents not monotheism and not polytheism. Rather, we call it monism as a system of belief. Monotheism refers to the nature of God, that there is one God alone. Monism asserts that there is one principle, one underlying force of nature, let's say, that explains all of reality. And you don't even have to be a believer in a God to be monistic. It can be philosophically oriented, where certain belief systems or certain energies really explain all of reality.